Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Andre and I'm your bookworm, and today we're back on the book reviews. So we've had a review of the episode of Lord of the Mysteries just before this week, and on Sunday let's keep going with book reviews, and we're diving into fantasy, into a new universe as well, one that has not been explored here on the channel, but it is very famous. A lot of you might know it already, and by this cover, you know that I'm talking about Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson. Alright, let's start by giving some context. Gardens of the Moon, written by Steven Erikson, is the first book of a series called Malazan, Book of the Fallen. This series is a 10-book series and is an epic fantasy series, very acclaimed across the whole fantasy fan base. It is also known for having a bit of a vicious fan base and also for having a very confusing start of the series. And regarding the fan base, please don't come for me if I say something that do not please you. But of course, if I'm saying something that is not really correct, do feel free to correct me, because I'm only human and I can also make mistakes. As the fans from Lord of the Mysteries know, I make plenty. But let's get on to this. So Gardens of the Moon is the first one, epic fantasy, very confusing at the start. I'll definitely get onto it when I talk about the review. But this first book was published in 1999, which was a lot later, or a lot earlier than I thought it would be. I thought this book was in late 2000s or something like that, but no, 1999. And since then, this book has been able to gather 131,000 ratings on Goodreads, which just shows its popularity. However, the score it has so far averages on 3.93 out of 5. Which again shows that it is very confusing start and a lot of people do not enjoy it. Now, you might have seen this edition behind me, which is slightly different from the other editions around, especially paperbacks, and that is because this is the special edition from the Broken Binding. I have a short where I open this and I show some of the illustrations around, but I can only say good things. I mean, the illustrations are really great, as you can see by this beautiful cover, and of course it has the end papers are just epic, to say the least, and even just the naked hardback, beautiful with great detail. And yeah, if you want to see more, just go to the short and you'll see more. But let's get on to the actual review of this book. But first, let's get on to our synopsis. If you're new and you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm basically going to narrate the synopsis so that you can have a sense of what this book is about if you've never heard about it. If you've heard about it, or if you want to avoid any spoilers, just skip to the next timestamp and you'll jump right into the review, right? Okay, let's get on with it. The Malazan Empire simmers with discontent. Bled dry by interminable warfare, bitter infighting, and bloody confrontations with the formidable Anamander Rake and his Tistean ancient and implacable sorcerers. Even the Imperial legions, long inured to the bloodshed, yearn for some respite. Yet Empress Lathine's rule remains absolute, enforced by her Dreadclaw assassins. For Sergeant Whiskeyjack and his squad of bridge burners, and for Tattersail, surviving cadre mage of the 2nd Legion, the aftermath of the Siege of Palais should have been a time to mourn the many dead. But Darugistan, last of the free cities of Kenabakis, yet holds out. It is to this ancient citadel that Lasine turns her predatory gaze. However, it would appear that the Empire is not alone in this great game. Sinister, shadow-bound forces are gathering as the gods themselves prepare to play their hand. Alright, with the synopsis done, and since we don't have any previous scores to look through to have some gauge, let's just jump into this review starting with plot. Okay, but actually, before we start with plot, I just have to say one small detail to give some context for this review, which is the fact that I have read this book before. So this is not my first read. I read this book in 2018, my first read I mean, and then I even read the second book, That House Gate, and I enjoyed them. I think my opinion of them was worse than it is currently, I mean, at least for Gardens of the Moon. But so take that into account that this will be a reread. And why am I rereading it considering I didn't finish the first time around? Simply because this time I have special editions. The other time I was determined to finish, it just was that I was reading the editions in Portuguese, and over there they divide everything in two, and I got a bit sick of just waiting so long to get the next installment, and so I decided once I get some proper editions, I'll read them through, and now's the time. So let's get on to plot. This book is very famous in the fantasy fan base for being very confusing about pretty much everything. Plot is no exception. We get thrown into the mix right from page 1 till the very end. And if you cannot keep up, good luck, because you'll be on your own and you better catch up really fast. Because I mean, we make so many turns, there's so many things happening in so many places, so many characters, that you constantly get bombarded with things, and so if you just miss one, it might be the crucial one and you'll just be lost. I remember on my first read, I was way too confused and I had to Google some of the aspects of this book to try and understand, sometimes even summaries of chapters, because I would read it and I would be still confused after rereading the same chapter. So get a sense that it will be confusing on your first read and you really need to pay a lot of attention. I think this time around I got a better hang of it, although the confusion was still there. There are still some aspects that I couldn't understand very well. It seemed like things were coming out of nowhere, a bit like pulling out of a hat, but I hope they are more consistent or more coherent once you've read a big chunk of this series. I think in this reread, I was able to appreciate the plot a tiny bit more, but in the sense of seeing how Steven Erikson is able to weave several plot lines and able to join them together in a coherent manner and have it still be fulfilling and have a good climax. I think on my first read, this category would definitely have a lower score, but for this reread as it stands, it will be a 4 out of 5. What about characters? Well, like I said, we get introduced to a lot of different characters in this book, and we also get a lot of POVs by themselves. So we do follow a couple different characters, but those characters meet a whole bunch of them. But what I found was, even though these characters don't feel immensely deep, I think they all have immense character, which allows them to create a connection with the reader more easily, because it makes you want to know what is going to happen to them, if they're going to succeed or fail in their endeavors. Because I think there are two ways a character can be connectable with the reader. One of them is if they are deep, if they feel very like historic, they have a lot of history, they feel like humans. The other one is for them to be iconic and to have their character spot on, and therefore you connect because you like how they are, or you dislike how they are pretty much. But that's also a type of connection. And even in one book, although yeah, it can be a bit of a bigger book, this edition I have is around 700 pages, you do see a good evolution of the characters in that book. So you see that they go through a trajectory of their arc, and I don't know if this will continue on in the next books of the series, but as it stands, it was pretty good. And I mean characters, for example, like Sori, you do see a good evolution, even though it's also one of the characters you get introduced on page 1. There's also characters that are mysterious or that you want to know more and you connect with them because of that mystery, like Anomander Rake. So for this category, I'm gonna give a 5 minus. I think we just need to develop these characters a bit more, or just be able to spend a bit more time with them to fully get that 5. But I don't doubt that Steven Erikson will be able to achieve this 5 in this category. What about world building? Well, this is another aspect that gets thrown to you at full speed like 100 different missiles. You have countries, empires, cities, and then you have magic systems, several ones that look very different from each other. You have gods entering and influencing events in this story, and some are around, some might be like there right away, or might not, might just be influencing people. What matters is that there is a lot. Is it all coherent? Sometimes not. Sometimes, like I said, it does seem like he's pulling things out of a hat and just to justify the plot going in a certain direction. And even on my reread, I did have to refresh what some of these things are through the glossary or through Google. So it's really a bombardment of information, and a lot of it might just go over your head and you might not be able to fully understand it. But I also expect that in the next books, this will improve as you get familiarized with the different systems that exist and with the country, the world, etc. But this is not to say that the world building is all negative. I do find the world building fascinating, both the cities, the peoples, and the interactions they have, but also the magic systems, the ones where it looks like a tarot card based system, which reminds me a bit of Lord of the Mysteries in that sense. I think that's the only similarity, but there are similarities here and there with the other fantasy series that I found interesting. I think it's just a matter of writing it in a way that it doesn't feel so overwhelming for the reader. Maybe at a better pace so that we don't feel like we're being bombarded everywhere all the time, all at once. So yeah, for this category, it's going to be a 4- out of 5. Again, I expect this category to be able to reach a 5 in the next books. It's just this one, the delivery wasn't the best. Second last category is writing style. And you might be thinking, so far, I've been giving really high scores considering that I've been criticizing these categories a lot. And that's because I do think the main issue of this book is related to the writing style itself. Because the world building looks cool, and the plot looks interesting, and the characters look deep enough. It's just that the writing of the soul, when you put all of this together, it kind of collapses a bit. I don't think the prose itself is bad. The opposite, I think it's quite good and engaging, and the use of the words that Steven Erikson uses is good. But I think it's more about the pacing and delivery of this story. The pacing of the book feels just a bit too fast, with us always running from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And the problem is, while you're digesting what just happened, you have to run and catch up to see what is the next thing happening over here. So you never really have a time to rest with some of those lower levels or valleys that in the pacing. And then of course, because you're shown everything everywhere all at once, you don't really get time to process what's happening, process what is this magic system or the other, what is this city or this other, what is this empire, etc. So for this category, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. In my first read, I would have probably given it a 2, but I do think it has some reread value, especially if you finish the whole series. And finally, enjoyment, our last category. And this is one of those cases where I actually enjoyed reading this book, despite being confused at parts and despite the writing be this bit of a mess where it was so accelerated, so bombarding that I felt a bit lost. Again, having read this book before definitely helped, because not only did I remember some of the characters, I remember some parts of the plot, what trajectories these characters would do, so it was easier to keep up with those while paying a bit more focus on the ones that I didn't remember as well. But besides that, this world has so much potential. I can truly see why it has such a big fan base. And it does seem very expanding, where a lot of things can happen. And reading it just makes me giddy to read the next one. I mean, I have the first 3, so it is a possibility that I'll read the second one very soon. And especially because I remember reading the second one before and liking the second book more than the first. So I can just hope that this time around the same will happen. But for this category, for now, I'll give it a 4 out of 5. And so we reached the end of this review. Just as a refresher, we have 4 for plot, 5- for characters, 4- for world building, 3 for writing style, and then 4 for enjoyment. This gives us a final score of 4 out of 5. Okay, that a lot of these categories have a minus in it, so it could go a bit lower if it had just tipped it off balance, but as it stands, it's a 4. It's similar to the Goodreads score as well, which shows that I kind of think more or less the same, maybe slightly higher than what Goodreads gives. But I mean, it is a good book overall. It is very confusing. This is definitely not a book that I would introduce to someone who just got into fantasy. Maybe a veteran that has read the big ones and is looking for something new that is still high quality, I would go for this. Yeah, I'm excited to read more and see how this world develops. But now, let me know what you think. Have you read this series? Have you only read 1 or 2 books and gave out? Why? Which book do you like the most? Comment down below and let me know. And of course, if you're new, don't forget, subscribe, like the content, and I shall be seeing you on Thursdays and Sundays, okay? See you soon.